Changed my name.
Did you get
My name.
assigned an iPad?
So I think we're going to take notes then.
It should have my name.
Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call the September 15th, 2022 meeting of the Portsmouth City Planning Board to order. We have one more member who's coming. Ms. Begala is traveling. Mr. Simonis is supposed to be here, but for now,
No, Corey?
Corey let us know at the end of the day that he would not be attending.
we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 7 members and 1 on the way. First item on the agenda is an update from the city attorney. We'll have Mr. Simonis join us when he gets here, describing the legislative changes that were recently enacted that affect the planning board and other city boards and the procedures on applications and the need to determine findings of fact.
I'd like to begin with a minor correction to what the chairman said. I am not the city attorney. City attorney is seated in the back of the room. Susan Morrell.
You show up on the city website as still the city.
He's a city attorney. How's that?
And documents we were provided.
Attorney Robert Sullivan, please.
Yeah. Formerly known as it is said that when the legislature is in session, no one is safe. And I think that our discussion tonight may illustrate the accuracy of some of that. We are here to talk about a new state law just effective for the first time this meeting of the planning board. And if I can find my glasses, I'm going to quote some of it to you. HB 1661, effective in this session of the legislature, was a omnibus catch-all trash bin, really, of laws that didn't relate to each other at all. The lengthy statute regulates, among other things, technical education in school districts, the design, engineering, and site work for a new legislative parking garage in Concord, a special fund establishes a special fund for the administration of opioid treatment programs, establishes a pilot program for individuals with developmental disabilities, revises the department's authority to recover unauthorized payments by the state, repeals certain reporting requirements, establishes investigatory procedures and licensing criteria for recreational camps, allows for alternative service of process in juvenile matters, creates a separate category of foster care licenses for kinship care homes, and a total number of other unrelated items numbering 27. Now, mixed almost invisibly in all of that is section 272:73 entitled Planning and Zoning, Administrative and Enforcement Procedures, Issuance of Decisions. And that section readopts significant portions of the laws which already regulate your conduct in making decisions, but adds this. The decision, meaning your decisions, zoning board decisions, any land use regulatory board decision, the decision shall include specific written findings of fact that support the decision. Failure of the board to make specific written findings of fact supporting a disapproval shall be grounds for automatic reversal and remand by the Superior Court upon appeal. In accordance with the time period set forth in RSA 677-5 or RSA 677:15, unless the court determines that other factors warrant the disapproval. That's it. Now, everything that we are going to discuss tonight flows from that black and white law that I quoted to you. Therefore, everything that's going to be discussed from this point onward tonight about this matter really amount to the best interpretations that your professional planning staff, myself, and the chairman, after consultation, have been able to develop to guide you in dealing with this new law. We are all going to give it our best effort to try to accomplish two things, I think. Number one, see that your decisions, particularly disapprovals, are defensible in court should an appeal come forward. And number two, recognizing that making all of these specific findings of facts on all of the elements of every case that becomes before you in the course of even one evening, to say nothing a year, is a massive undertaking. And what we are hoping to do is to provide a methodology that will make your life a little bit easier in carrying that heavy burden. Next, I'd like to discuss for a minute what the law was before this new statute became effective. And the planning board has always been required to make findings of fact to support its decision. It's always been in the statute. But until the language that I quoted to you got adopted, the way this worked out in real life was this. If someone appealed one of your decisions, then both sides would go looking for these findings of fact. They wouldn't have them specifically listed as you're going to be listing them from now on. They would be contained in the record itself. And in our case in Portsmouth, when an appeal was filed, we would usually get a transcript, not minutes, but an actual transcript of your proceedings, and we would just read what you had said, line by line, sentence by sentence, looking for facts that could be used to defend your decision in court. And that's how the specific findings of fact came forward prior to this law. We found them in the record and presented them to the court. Now you're going to have to find them yourself and state them clearly in a letter of decision. So substantively what you're doing, nothing really changes. You always had to be making findings of fact. But procedurally, you're going to have to package them and present them in a way that was not done before. This is brand new law. There's, I think, 270 cities and towns in the state, which means there's 540 planning boards and zoning boards. Every single one of them is in the exact same situation tonight that you are in, struggling to figure out how to deal with this new burden imposed upon them by the legislature. Most of those zoning boards and planning boards are in towns, not cities, and the vast majority are in very small towns, which do not have the major advantage which you have, and that is a professional planning staff, people who, by means of education and experience, know how to handle these matters and can and will be there to help you make these specific findings of fact. I mean, what's going to happen in the town of Orford? But we'll be able to, I think, do a good job we have a plan, and I'm going to outline it to you now. But at the beginning of the outline, I want to say this. It's just an outline. It is just a plan. It is subject to change if, in our experience or observation, change becomes necessary or appropriate. This law, just like every law that contains ambiguities or requires refinement, will be clarified by means of the court cases that it invites. Judges will look at this very statute, look at actions of planning boards such as yourself, such as the town of Orford, and they will determine what is really required of a planning board in terms of making specific findings of fact. And as the court decisions come in, we'll read them, and to the extent they can be of guidance to you in performing your duties, we will report them to you, and we will make adjustments in our recommendations to you. But tonight is the kickoff of all of this, and we have the planning director and I and the chair have met and discussed how to proceed from here. We have some ideas. I'll share them with you now, subject, as I said, to the distinct possibility, if not probability, that our recommendations and our policies and our forms that we'll present to you are going to change as experience is received. It indicates they should change. So, as I said, one of the big immediate problems that we perceived was the time burden that making specific findings of fact will present upon you. You already have lengthy, burdensome meetings, and it certainly is not going to speed them up, that you have to stop and make findings of fact to support every element of every application and every evening. But we think we do have ways that can move it along. Two main elements of this are that the planning staff and planning department have prepared forms, which you should have in front of you now. And the forms will assist you in identifying facts and enlisting the facts which you do find. I think at this point it might be appropriate to define just what is a finding of fact. It's easier almost to say what a finding of fact is not. The fact that you might believe, any one of you might believe, that an applicant satisfies the criteria contained in the ordinance to be granted approval. That statement is not a fact. That statement is a conclusion of law. Conclusion of law is what is reached in the end when you make your decisions. It is not what is required in your specific findings of fact. Another thing which is not a fact is anything that's irrelevant to the application before you. So, for example, if a particular real estate developer has been here many times before, and you have either a good experience history or a bad experience history with that developer, that too is not a fact, that the developer might have done what they said last time around or failed to do what they said last time around. It's not a specific finding of fact, and the reason why it's not is, even though it might be true, it is not relevant to any of these criteria that you are required to apply to the applications in front of you. The specific findings of fact that you have to find are the ones which support or oppose the criteria listed in the ordinance that you are supposed to apply in connection with any particular application. Here's a clear example. In a site review situation, where one of the traditional site review issues is drainage, site drainage. If you find that the amount of stormwater that might fall in a parking lot during a predictable storm is greater than the diameter of the pipes necessary to carry that stormwater away from that parking lot, then the statement that the drainage infrastructure is insufficient to handle the demand that will come on this parking lot, that's a finding of fact. And those are the kind of things that you need to be looking for to list in your specific list that you'll be prepared. So that's what a finding of fact is. It's what a finding of fact is not. To help you make these findings of fact, the initial heavy lifting is going to come from the planning department staff, as we said, by education and experience, professionals who know what to look for, know what they're doing, and they will suggest for the planning board to find what the staff feels are relevant facts that will bear on whether or not a particular application should be granted or denied. The statute makes it your responsibility to actually find the facts. So whatever the staff should suggest to you will certainly be helpful, but you need to make the decision in the end to satisfy this law. Now, the second step in this process that we're recommending to you has come out of discussion with the chair, and we feel that the process will go more smoothly for everyone if the chair takes perhaps a greater role in individual decision-making on applications than you have seen in the past. That greater role really being to marshal the board to move towards making the specific findings of fact in writing that you now have to make. The chair, just by having it in his head that you have to get through this hurdle before you complete your decision, will guide you towards the hurdle and ask appropriate questions to help get you over it. For example, what does the planning board feel about the drainage calculations on this plan, as an example? So you will have a form from the staff. You will have suggested relevant findings of fact that you can find from the staff. You will have a chairman guiding you towards the decision-making process, the proper decision-making process that you have to make, which will lead to these specific findings of fact. You should have in front of you now, as I said, that form which can be used for tonight's purposes, and is the only form that's going to exist until it gets changed, and I'd like to briefly discuss that. It will be entitled Procedural Guidance Finding of Fact Forms. After a couple of sentences that basically just describe more tersely what I just said, it then goes to procedures for review and the type of motions that you might make. And I lost my glasses. This presentation is going to change dramatically.
Where'd they go?
Yeah. It's been determined after some discussion with the chair and the planning director that most of these new changes will come into effect after you've followed your normal processes and held your public hearing. Don't see where anything really has to change up until that point in any application. But after you've had your public hearing on every application that comes before you, as that part of that process of marshaling you to head in the direction mandated by the statute, the chair will invite a review and discussion of draft supplemental information and findings which will have been presented to you in writing by the planning staff. As I said, you are the ones that need to make the findings, not the planning staff. as I would think would be the case in the normal application, there will be no disagreement about these things. When the staff reports to you that something appears to be a fact, you will look at it and you will agree, I would think, in most cases, and simply adopt the recommendation of the staff for that finding of fact. This is intended to accomplish two of the things I said we were trying to do for you. Simplify your burden and direct you towards the relevant criteria to make a decision. So that will come first, but at that point, first major decision point arises. If everybody's in agreement, if the staff is in agreement, if you are in agreement with the staff, and if the result of that agreement is it appears that there are sufficient relevant findings of fact to support this application, and it's going to be granted, then at that point, in a simplified case, in the easiest manner, you would simply adopt these facts which have been suggested, and you'd have to do it by vote, saying you're doing it. And then with that in place, and by means of another motion, you would approve the application in front of you. That, of course, is the easy case. They will not all be easy cases. There will be cases where there's not a general agreement on what the facts should be, or whether the planning staff recommendation should be accepted, or whether other facts need to be brought into the matter and adopted. To adopt a fact, or to make any finding of fact, you need a majority vote of the planning board. I mean, that, we have to be able to show that there was in fact a vote on some specific finding of fact by which a majority of those present and voting on the issue before the planning board agreed to the specific fact. Absent that majority vote on specific finding of fact, that fact is not found, and it cannot be in the decision letter as supporting your decision. So this is the kind of thing that the chair will be mindful of, and by means of asking questions and requesting votes, he will bring you to that point. So everything really flows from that two-step process. You'll get facts from staff. You will consider them, adopt them, add to them, subtract for them, whatever you feel is necessary. And then after that, the second motion, the motion whether to grant or deny an application, is likely to be suggested. At this point, the process might actually be easier, because after you've gone through the facts and made your findings, if you find, for example, that the facts support every item of the criteria that you're supposed to apply, well then, your decision suggests itself at that point. And it would be a motion to approve, the second motion that I talked about, and life would go on. Now I expect it's going to be the most typical case. The untypical case will be the difficult one, and as you know better than anybody, you do get difficult decisions to make from time to time, and on those you are just going to have to debate the facts among yourself until, with regard to each necessary, relevant, specific fact, you can get 5 votes to make a decision whether the fact exists or doesn't. This is where the process might slow meetings down substantially, but there'll be so many votes required in a disputed case. You know, with debate on each vote, debate on each fact, it could get very difficult. But hopefully, with the assistance of the staff, and you see plainly how it works by looking at the form that's been provided to you, we will be able to move along quickly enough so that it's not necessary to start having 2 meetings every month, for example, to complete this. So that is what the new law is, how we are going to try to help you apply it, how we think that's going to work out, Most importantly, as I said, the courts will be clarifying this as time goes on. Everyone's experience will be clarifying this as time goes on. Your own experience will clarify this as time goes on, and we'll make adjustments in the forms and the recommendations as time goes on. But we have to apply the law starting with the next application that appears in front of you tonight. That's basically the presentation, but I'm happy to talk further, answer any questions that I'm able to answer.
Before we have questions of Attorney Sullivan, I just want to note that Mr. Simonis is here, and I'd like you to sit for Ms. Magala tonight.
Absolutely. Sorry, it's late.
Any questions for Attorney Sullivan? Yes.
I have a small list. There's no changes as to whether or not we need a majority vote or a 2/3 vote, right? There's no changes to that.
What I want to make sure that we can do, because the real relevance of all this is when your denials are appealed to court. So that's when the rubber will hit the road on these things. And I do not want to have debates in the courtroom as to whether you actually found the fact or not. So the two of you may have found it, and the remainder of the board didn't find it. And we don't really want that to be what the court case is about. And if we can show, with regard to all the specific relevant facts, that a majority of the planning boards voted to find that fact, then we will never have a court debate about whether the board found it or not.
So it would be a majority. Do we have to find findings of facts on determinations of completeness?
No, I don't think so. I think it's findings of fact which support the elements of the criteria for the decision.
And then my last question is, are we allowed under statute to limit the times of our meetings?
I'm sorry?
Are we allowed to limit the times of our meetings, like how long they can go on? I'm just imagining I might be here when the crow starts going for breakfast, so. I'm just trying to make sure, could we, if this starts
Sure.
becoming, we know it's going to be a complicated
There are
one?
rules that apply, public notice rules,
Yep.
but you in fact can limit the length of your meetings, but you might force yourself in a situation of having to have more meetings if you do so.
Oh, I
And the main
definitely don't
rule,
want
the
that.
main rule to keep in mind is, members of the public have a right to know when you're meeting and what you're going to decide when you meet. And that's the reason why public notice is issued. If you change anything from what is published in the public notice, then either you have to republish a notice or you have to announce to everyone who's present in the room the first time exactly where and when the issue is going to be brought back.
Thank you, that's all.
Yes, Jim.
Attorney Sullivan, can a planning board member offer their own criteria at the meeting if it's not listed on the handout ahead of time?
Yes.
Wait, Bob, 1 second. The criteria is established by the regulations. So in the zoning code, it actually says for planning board to approve a site plan, it must make the following findings. For a planning board to approve an accessory dwelling unit, it must make the following findings. So I think that you can amend the column that says supporting information. And that really is what Bob's referring to as the relevant facts. That's the column where you can say, I don't think it actually, I'd like to add to that, propose a change to that or an addition to that. But the criteria themselves are embedded within the code into the zoning ordinance. So I would say that introducing a new criteria would not be consistent with the regulations. Would you disagree with that, Bob?
No, you can offer another criteria as being relevant, but it has to be from the ordinance. You can't invent a criteria.
I'm just trying to think of a situation, say the planning staff missed a criteria. Can that be added at the meeting?
Well, I think that's true with both respect to criteria and supporting facts.
Okay.
If I can help with that, some of the criteria are very, very broad, like under site plan. One of them is adheres with all the city regulations, and we certainly don't want to list all the city regulations. So that could be an example where you might find something that wasn't listed because we're not going to list all of those.
Right, that's what.
Yeah, that is, I appreciate that clarification.
Any other questions for Bob? Mechanically, I'm going to try to help with this. It's going to be a learning process, And what I would hope we can do when we get to that point, after we get through an application public hearing, I'd like to go through the points and reach consensus. We're looking and making sure folks are in agreement, so we don't have to vote on every single finding. We can, if the board chooses to vote on every single finding, we can do that. But I think, picking up what Councilor Moreau said, I'd like to be home before the crows are flying out for breakfast. So I think we can do it that way. We'll learn together and make sure that it works. I'll make notes, and for those of us with iPads and Apple devices, I can share electronically, and I think I can share with Stephanie in the back of the room, and I think that worked. So I think we're ready to try it.
Thanks, Bob.
Good luck.
Brave new world.
Yeah.
It's a brave new world.
Next on the agenda is our minutes from the August 18th meeting, and folks had a chance to review those.
I make a motion to approve.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have determinations of completeness. The first one is request of Hemlock Way Investments LLC as owner for property at 0 Petition Drive, requesting preliminary final subdivision approval to subdivide one existing lot into 2 lots.
So moved. To approve.
Second.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's accepted as complete. Request of Bromley Portsmouth LLC as owner for property at 1465 Woodbury Avenue, requesting an amended site plan review approval for the demolition of existing structure, parking, and utility infrastructure. Planning Department recommends this also be accepted as complete. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Accepted as complete. For anybody in the room, the request of Coventry Realty LLC for property at 111 State Street has been withdrawn, so that we will not be acting on that this evening. The next is, again, request of Hemlock Way Realty Investments LLC owner for property at 0 Patricia Drive, requesting preliminary and final subdivision approval to subdivide a lot with an area of 137,549 square feet and 414 feet continuous street frontage on a private road into 2 lots as follows. Proposed Lot 1 with an area of 92,908 square feet and 150 feet of continuous street frontage on a private road. Proposed Lot 2 with an area of 44,641 square feet and 264 feet of continuous street frontage on a private road. This property is on Assessor Map 283, Lot 11, and lies within the single-family residence A district. Who is here to speak to this application?
Good evening. Thanks for hearing me tonight. I'm Mike Garrity with Hemlock Way Realty Investments and Garrity Planning Consultants. Well, I guess one and the same person. Was here before the board a few months ago requesting final extension of our subdivision approval, which unfortunately we were not able to work with staff to complete a final condition. To allow for Mylar recordation. So we are back here again tonight to seek a new approval, which would replace the expired one that expired, I believe, last month on the 18th. So I don't know if I need to go through a detailed presentation. I certainly can, but it's as the chair announced, it's a 2-lot subdivision off of Martha Terrace. It is a little, I guess, complicated in some ways, but rather simple in others. It's a simple 2-lot subdivision that meets all the requirements, dimensional requirements for frontage and lot size and setbacks and utilities that will serve the site, etc. It is accessed via a small portion of right-of-way that is in a built condition that is owned by the city but not maintained by the city. And then it is also accessed by another portion of right-of-way that is the top button, I hope. It's not the top button. Which button is it again?
You have to hold it down.
I have to hold it down. There it is. So in a smaller portion, or an additional portion of right-of-way that is privately owned by neighboring lots, both to the to the east and the west. And so that's how the property is accessed and also subdivided off that private road. So we've been through TAC again. We have previously received approval from the Conservation Commission, or I should say at least recommendations from them, for the conditional use permit for our buffer impacts to the wetlands as a result of rebuilding the road that's presently there. And so we're just back here tonight to seek a new approval. I think in working with Beverly, I think we're there again, but I think we're finally there. So we should be recording Mylar within, I would hope, within the next 60 days. That's a reasonable target.
Yes.
And I guess if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
It's the same plan that we approved previously, is that correct?
Same plan you approved previously 2 months ago as far as the extension, and it's the same plan that the planning board approved back in February of 2021.
And if I could add to that, TAC had no new comments, and Mr. Garapi did submit a letter summarizing how he's met all previous planning board stipulations, and we also reviewed that with legal today. And really, the only stipulations we have are just the standard stipulations that we normally provide. The reason this was held up had to do with the portion that is owned by the city, making sure before we offer that to all the abutting property owners, of which there are 3, making sure that they're adequately noticed, and that if they choose, we can't do a release deed to somebody who hasn't actually told us that they want to receive the property, because we are retaining public access and maintenance on that property, so that just really creates a tax responsibility for them. So we want to make sure we do that outreach correctly, and that the folks who would like to retain the ownership of that, in this case it's Hemlock Realty, and what we understand to be the abutter to the north, will release it to them. So it was really just getting that squared away, which required a little bit of research and to make sure that we did it correctly. And that's really why it got held up. But we think we have a good strategy for getting that final item corrected in this subdivision plan, which unfortunately did expire and required a new submittal. But there were no new comments.
Any questions of the applicant or the planning director?
So in a nutshell, we held it up. We already approved it.
I think it was getting that last, I would say that it got held up because of the nature of the paper street originally that kind of pushed it all the way to August. But then the last part, we had asked, there's a prior stipulation, you may recall, we asked and the planning board approved the stipulation saying that they will do outreach to the neighbors and that the neighbors can waive their rights. One neighbor never responded.
Gotcha.
So we wanted to take it into our own hands and do an official certified letter, and hopefully, under our outgoing city attorney's advice, that we go ahead and maybe do even in-person outreach. So we're just trying to do our due diligence.
Got it. But we still have to make the same motions to approve it like we did last time.
You just pretend like it's a brand new one, except there's
We have to go through the process that was just described first.
Copy that.
So, yes,
Any other questions of the applicant?
Am I the first findings of fact?
Yes.
You are. You are.
Okay.
Stand back.
It's a whole new brave world.
Don't forget your pin on the way out.
So, I mean,
This is worth it now, then. I guess.
so would a motion based on
Not yet. We have to have a public
Well,
hearing.
But as long as it's what was prior approved, and they continue to do what was requested, all we're doing is looking to grant an extension.
No, it's under.
We
A
have,
new approval,
It's a new approval.
Sorry.
It's a whole new approval.
with the new
because
format.
the other one expired.
Gotcha.
And we do have draft sample motions. If you find the findings of fact that are for this item, LU 22-174, it should be on the top of your packet. If you go to the end, we have some sample motion language for you. And that's for each one of the items tonight. We're trying to help a little bit, so
Appreciate it.
This one, 172.
apologies, 172.
No worries.
Any other questions? I'm going to open up the public hearing. Does anybody here wish to speak to, for, or against this application? Is there anybody on Zoom? One more chance. Anybody here wish to speak to, for, or against this application? Going to close the public hearing. Now we do the findings of fact. So I assume everybody has the draft, and what, as I described earlier and as Attorney Sullivan described in better detail, the staff has prepared this draft for us to work from. This one's actually fairly easy in comparison to what some might be. Most of them relate to the fact that this is just a subdivision, and TAC has approved it recently, reapproved it. It's approved it at least twice or three times, I guess, at this point. So, number one, the subdivision rules and regulations. The application was reviewed and approved by TAC. Is everybody in agreement that that satisfies that first criteria as a finding? Do we make a finding that we have satisfied that?
Yes.
Yes.
Consensus?
Yes.
Second is requirements for final plat. Similarly, we've been reviewed by TAC. TAC found that it was in conformance. Do we have any disagreements? We
Agree.
good?
Yes.
General requirements, again, it was reviewed by TAC, and if anybody wants to refer to subdivision regulations for more detail, it's section 6, Roman 6. Again, we've approved this previously, TAC's approved it recently, so we need to make a finding that this conforms to the general requirements under section 6.
Yes.
We good with that?
Yes.
No objections. Design standards, similarly, section 7. Everybody good with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Anybody wish to add anything to these findings?
Looks good the second time around.
So
That's not a finding of fact.
Oh, come on, you're not letting me have any fun.
I do want to add one thing that I think is not correct in the motions, that there is also a request, I believe, for a modification to the street standards that is before. I don't think that we, did we?
18 feet versus
It's on our
32.
agenda, yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that's is it in the memo?
It's
but
in the memo.
But it did not make the sample motion, so I think it would need
I
to.
think, I think we have to refer back to the memo after we go through.
Yeah.
If we are in agreement that we've gone through, as we have the findings of fact, I have yeses circled on all of them.
So you're looking for a sample?
I'd like a motion to propose that we strike draft from the findings of fact as presented to us, make those findings of fact as adopted as a part of this application.
No, we have to move to find that the subdivision application meets the standards set forth in the subdivision regulations and adopt the supplemental information as findings of fact as presented.
Second.
That's fine. Anybody have any comments, anything to add? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
They are adopted.
Then we still have to make another motion.
Now we move to the actual.
We move to approve the subdivision as presented, and the first, do we have to do that and then the votes for the stipulations? That's where I'm
I
confused.
think you should do the modification first.
First and then,
yeah.
okay.
What about granting the waiver? Do we need that?
Yeah, we have to grant the waiver.
We have to grant the waiver before we can approve. Okay, that's where I was good and confused. All right, so the first motion would be to vote to grant the waiver to the residential street minimum standards to allow 18 feet of pavement where 32 feet is required.
That's a motion, I'll second it.
It was. Thank you.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Waiver is granted. Now we need a motion.
Yes, now we need to move to approve the subdivision as presented with the preliminary and final subdivision with the included 2.1 through 2.5 stipulations in the memo.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimously adopted. You are
Did our
approved
first
again.
one, yay.
Thank you so much. I feel honored.
Congratulations.
Thank you for giving us a fairly easy one to start.
Nice practice.
It was.
Next item on the agenda is request of Blues O'Leary Family Living Trust as owner for property located at 225 Wybert Street, requesting conditional use permit approval as permitted under section 10814-.40 of the zoning ordinance to construct an attached accessory dwelling unit. This property is located on Assessor Map 133, Lot 54, and located in the General Residence A District. Who is here to speak to this application?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Arilda Dench. I've prepared this application, and I'm here to present it tonight for the Bless O'Leary Family Trust. And I wanted to tell you that Mark O'Leary is here in the red T-shirt, and he's very hard of hearing, so he's following the proceedings on his phone, which is transcribing everything for him. So just so you know, he's not checking his email. He's, he's following along. And if you speak clearly, that will help him. So I'm just going to go through the application here. If you look at sheet 1.0, it's okay if it doesn't come up there, but the first page, there's a neighborhood plan that shows the general neighborhood and the size of his lot in relation to those in the area, and it's larger than the surrounding areas lots, and it's a corner lot, so that makes it extra visible to the neighbors. We have taken care with this application to have the least impact on the neighbors as possible, because they're concerned about this open space. This is the sheet I'm on. So then if you look at the zoning information, the schedule on the left, down at the bottom, you can see the maximum building coverage allowed for general residence A is 25%. And even with the additions, we will only be at 18.2%. The minimum open space required is 30%, and with the additions, we will have a nice generous 67.3%. So we're meeting the requirements there. Then going to sheet 1.1, this is the existing site plan. And you can see that the two buildings on the lot, the main house and the shed, are very modest lot coverage, and then there's a nice big backyard. Behind the house, there are a couple of decks, and those will be removed to make room for the accessory dwelling unit. The lot is nice and deep, 157 feet deep. Hawthorne Street is to the south, so the sun is coming from the Hawthorne Street side of the building. Then going to the next sheet, page 1.2, here you can see what we're proposing for the site plan. There's the parking area. There's a small shaded area, and that represents where we're adding pavement so that the parking for the primary residence will be tandem parking. And then the ADU parking is separate next to that. And then you can see there's a connector, a 16-foot wide connector that connects between the primary residence and the proposed ADU. And in that connector, we're going to have a handicapped accessible lift. The ADU is going to be for Mark's mother, who's elderly, and that's a possibility that will have to happen. And what that creates is, in essence, two handicapped accessible units here. The one is at grade level, the ADU, and then his home will also become handicapped accessible. And I think the nice thing here is that there will be no ramps on the outside of the building at all. Sometimes those are unattractive for the home and the neighborhood, so those will not be necessary. With this plan, there's no accessory dwelling unit near the rear property line, so keeping away from the neighbors. It's closest to Hawthorne Street, so keeping away from the two neighbors on both sides. This meets the city master plan to address the increased population through increased density. But to modify that, we're adding screening on both sides of the lot, between them and the neighbor at number 205 Wybert, and then between them and the neighbor behind at, I don't have that one on there. So I also wanted to point out that with this, the addition of the connector and the ADU, there's only going to be a single rear entry to the home. So that suggests that it's suggests to the public that it's a single-family residence. There's only going to be one rear entry, and from there, the person would go right or left into the primary residence or the ADU. And there's only a single patio out back, so that also suggests that it's a single-family residence. And because the ADU is pulled far away from the neighbors at 205, even with winter sunlight, there shouldn't be any shadow on their home, or a very small one. And I also wanted to say that with these additions here, we will have in the final construction drawings package a stormwater management plan. So any water running off the buildings or through the lot will be sure to go where it's supposed to go and not go where it's not supposed to go. So that's also a concern of ours. So that's it for the site plans. And then the next is the photos. So the first sheet is the existing house. And you can see it's a traditional home from, I believe, 1850. It has the heavy gable trim and heavy returns. And I just wanted to note, we will be removing the shutters on this house. They weren't original and they're just crowded in. And the house also currently has vinyl siding and aluminum sheathing over the trim. So that's hiding the original nice traditional trim. And in the future, they will be planning to remove that and restore what's underneath. So when we designed the ADU and connector, we're showing traditional trim on it rather than use vinyl siding and aluminum trim sheathing. We're going to use real traditional trim that will echo what's underneath what's there now. Then the next page has photographs of the adjacent properties. In the upper left picture, we see the property immediately to the left of 225 Wybert as you're looking at the front of the building. You can see the shed on the Bless-O'Leary property in the back. And then the photo in the upper right is the property directly behind 25 Hawthorne Street. And lower left is across Wybert Street from 225 Wybert. That's 232 Wybert. That's directly across. And then finally in the lower right, that's the across Hawthorne Street right at the corner, 243 Wybert Street. On the next sheet, page 3.1, here's the floor plan for the connector and the ADU. You can see again the single shared entry with handicap accessibility for both units. The ADU meets the 750 square foot max total gross floor area, and no more than 2 bedrooms, so that's what we have here. And the idea with the second bedroom is that Mark's mother may eventually need a live-in caretaker, and so we have the second bedroom for that. And in the future, there could, a small family could be housed here. Going to the next page, 4.0, here I'm showing a cross-section through the connector, so you can see why we've made the pitch of this roof lower, and that's to miss the windows upstairs so it doesn't interfere with them. And the front porch that's existing on this house is also a low pitch, so it echoes that. And going to the next sheet, page 4.1, this is the view from Hawthorne Street. And here in my notes, I'm saying that the additions will have clapboard siding, 4-inch exposure to match existing, that the new window style will match or coordinate with the existing historic double-hung windows, which are 2/1 lights on the main house. The new trim and overhangs will match the original, which is under the existing vinyl and aluminum trim sheathing. And then the new roofing material, the architectural grade asphalt roofing shingles. And you can see that the ridge of the ADU is 4 feet below the eave line of the existing main house. So we're trying to keep the roof line down to impact the neighbors as little as possible. The next sheet, page 4.2, is the view from the rear, from the backyard. And here you can see that we've made the pitch of the ADU a little bit lower than the main house, and that's, again, to keep the ridge line down and keep it looking modest. And I also want to note that the lighting fixtures will all be dark sky-friendly lights and not sending a lot of glare around the neighborhood. To the left, you can see the level of Hawthorne Street, which is up high. The whole lot slopes down from Hawthorne Street down to the opposite side. And that creates a low area in which to place the ADU, and it puts the ADU at the same level as the parking so that a handicapped person can easily get in there. In the foreground, you can see the single patio. Then going to sheet 4.3, this is the view from the driveway side, from the side of the house on which is the property 205 Wybridge Street. And here we're looking at the ADU on the left and then the connector in the middle. And there's a little covered entry there. The doorway going in is an old-fashioned door, traditional door to coordinate with the one that's existing on the front of the house. There's a small roof extended over the existing basement door to keep water from ending up in there. And you can see that everything is coordinated to match with the existing house. The next sheet, sheet 5.1, this is a massing study that compares the facade areas of the different buildings. And I have two different versions of this sheet because the ordinance wasn't completely clear as to how you count the facade areas with an ADU and connector. So in this version, I have the house and connector counted together because the building area of the connector is counted with the main house and not with the ADU. So those two together is 1,138 square feet of facade area. The ADU facade area is 298 square feet. Together, 1,436 square feet total facade. And doing the math, that makes the 298 21% of the total, which is well below the 40% required. Also, I wanted to note that there's a heavy dashed line going across the center of the ADU, and that's the level of Hawthorne Street sidewalk in the foreground, so you can see how high up it is. And then I think you have in your packages also an additional sheet that looks just like this one, 5.1, but it's dated September 7. And this shows the facade areas figured differently, where just the existing house and porch are figured together, and that's 961 square feet. And then the connector and ADU are figured together, and that's 477 square feet. And doing the math there, the ADU facade is still just 33% of the total facade areas, so still well below the 40%. And then the other sheet I have in the package is sheet 6.1, which outlines criteria from the ordinances. The first section is will be gone over in the findings of fact. Do you want me to go through this still in my package, or wait for the findings of fact? Or does it not matter?
Well, you won't address the findings of fact, but it's up to you if you wish to go through them, I think.
Okay.
This was in our packet, so hopefully the board has reviewed them.
Okay, it's pretty quick. Basically, 10.814.31, that the principal dwelling unit and ADU shall not be separated in ownership, and that is the plan, of course, that they will both be continued to be owned by the Bless O'Leary Family Trust. And then the next two, the 10.814.32 and 10.814.321, that either the principal dwelling unit or the accessory dwelling unit shall be occupied by the owner as his or her principal place of residence, and that is true, that will be happening. And then the last one, 10.814.33, that neither the principal dwelling unit nor the accessory dwelling unit shall be used for any business, except that the property owner may have a home occupation use in the unit that he or she occupies, as allowed or permitted elsewhere in this ordinance. And one of the trustees of the Bless O'Leary Family Living Trust does have a home occupation use in the principal dwelling unit, and that will continue. The next section is the conditional use permit approval criteria, and I wrote this out here. 10.243.21, and that specifies that the design and scale of the proposed structure, the nature and intensity of the proposed use, and the layout and design of the site will be compatible with adjacent and nearby properties, buildings, and uses, and will complement the character of surrounding development, and will encourage the appropriate and orderly development and use of land and buildings in the surrounding area, and we feel that this meets all that criteria.
For each of these, ma'am, you can just state how you address them. You don't have to recite the section of the ordinance.
Oh, okay. The next one, 10.243.22, so all the public and private infrastructure and services are available and adequate for this property. The next one, the surrounding streets have adequate vehicular and pedestrian infrastructure to serve this additional ADU, which should have very little impact. And then the .24, it shouldn't have any adverse impacts on the abutting and surrounding properties on the account of traffic noise, odors, vibrations. We've kept the building again towards Hawthorne Street, and there'll be screening shrubbery, and it's just going to be a home, so there shouldn't be any adverse impacts. And because the building is designed to complement the existing structure, the structure will not contribute to any significant decline in property values of the adjacent properties, tastefully designed and still plenty of open space on the lot. And that's basically everything I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Are there any
Have any
questions
questions?
of the applicant? Yes. You first.
It looks like in your entrance that the lift is actually being put in for the main residence and not the ADU. Is that correct?
Well, what it's there for is so that Mark's mother can get from her unit into his unit.
Okay, but that, because there's a difference in
That's the
grade.
purpose now. But in the future, it could be used as a handicapped accessible for the main house. So then both units become handicapped accessible. But right now, it's, to get between the two.
So can I keep going? I happened to drive by this earlier today, and seems to be a much bigger grade than what you've put in your plans from Hawthorne Street down into that.
Oh, okay.
And it seems like there's going to be some major, is this going, I'm assuming on a slab, so.
Yes.
Do you have any background on the drainage and how the drainage is going to work? Because I have a feeling this is going to be a big issue.
If it is, we will be hiring then a stormwater management firm out of Portsmouth that's GWM Consulting, professional stormwater management engineer, because we want to make sure the water is directed to the street or wherever it should be going, so that it doesn't create any issues for surrounding properties.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And Andrew?
This is maybe a point of clarification and another question for you, but if this is approved, are we approving it as a handicap accessible ADU? Is that part of the stipulation?
You're just approving the ADU. I don't think that, that happens to be a component that she shared the information for you, but it's just, you're really giving a conditional use permit for an attached accessory dwelling unit.
Thank you.
That would not, that's the way they have it fitted, and they've shared that information, but that would not be a condition that would have to retain on site.
Sure. So to that point, I note the lift and the circles, the dotted circles within the plan for turning radius and accessibility purposes. Can you go into further detail about other ADA compliant aspects of this design?
Oh, sure. So here you can see on the floor plan, there will be a short ramp that goes up 8 inches from the walkway that comes from the parking area onto the porch, and that door going in will be a low threshold door, so it can be easily rolled over. In the bathroom, there's the circle for full turnaround, and to have that, you get a wall-hung sink so that the person's feet can swing around underneath the sink, and that's why it's shown going underneath the sink a little bit. Then it's just convenient to have a second bedroom for in case the person needs extra live-in care, 24-hour care. There's a rectangle in front of the sink in the bathroom, and that indicates a space for a wheelchair to pull in, that there's enough space for a wheelchair to pull in there in front of the sink. With the kitchen, it's a matter of picking out the proper appliances that meet the criteria. And I guess that's it, the circle in the bedroom showing there's enough room to maneuver in there for a
How
person by
long is
themselves.
the ramp, the entry ramp?
So that's going to be, let's see, I have a scale with me. It's, the slope is 1 to 10. You can go between 1.8 if you need to, and 1 to 12.
Should be about 80 inches then.
So if you, hold on, I'll let you know.
Andrew, why are you curious about that?
It just wasn't delineated on the
Okay.
plan, so I'm wondering if it's 5 feet or 10 feet or 12 feet. Just overall, I guess, design and.
It's about 10 feet long, that
Yeah.
sloped area there. Yeah, about 10 feet.
So suffice to say that there are some, I guess, constraints or requirements set by the ADA compliance and the ADA design, but outside of the bedroom space, bathroom space, and the access, the kitchen, dining, and living space are not necessarily particularly designed for the ADA use itself.
Well, as I've had it, it all can be used. It's, for the kitchen, it's a matter of picking out the right appliances. There's plenty of space there to roll in front of all of those stations, and there's plenty of room around the table and living area.
So it can be, it's not a requirement, it's a point of information, so.
Really what I'm trying to arrive at for myself visually is whether or not it has to be 750 square feet, and if it is 750 square feet, how much of that is due to requirement, or if it's just desire and preference, so that's the nature of the question, more so.
It's partly both, because to make the unit nice and spacious for whomever might live there
Sure.
in the future, as well as a handicapped person.
Any other questions?
Yep.
I have a question, because we're working on this section of the ordinance. Did you find the 750 square feet to work with what you're trying to do?
Yes, yep. It was tight, but it all seemed to fit in there, yep.
And the space connecting between the accessory unit and the house, you've noted that on the plans as shared space, and just for the board's information, that doesn't count as gross floor area. So it's not part of the scale. And thank you for noting that on the plan.
Okay.
Any other questions? I'm going to open up the public hearing. Anyone here wish to speak to, for, or against this application?
I think you dropped something on the ground.
And you can take your seat.
Okay.
You cannot answer questions that may come up during the hearing, but you can address the board with anything you wish to address if something comes up you wish to address.
Good evening. My name is Mark Anderson. My wife Robin and I live on 25 Hawthorne Street, which directly abuts this property at 225 Wybird. We have lived there in our home for about 27 years. This project as a detached ADU was previously denied by the Board of Adjustments due to its scale and noncompliance. In response to the concerns raised by my wife and I, our neighbors, and the Board of Adjustment, this project has now been redesigned as an attached ADU. Firstly, we appreciate Mark O'Leary's efforts to modify the project to comply with the city ordinances and reduce the direct impact to our property. However, we still feel that we still have concerns about the scale of proposed buildings. This is not simply an apartment over in a garage, it's a full house. It will overwhelm the lot and the neighborhood, and we recognize that the proposed structures comply with the zoning ordinances, but we do not believe that the scale of this project aligns with the intent of an ADU. Additionally, we are saddened by such a dramatic loss of our open space. Most concerning is that this project increases the density of the neighborhood by introducing a potential rental property. As you've heard, there's been several comments about, his mother's going to live there in the near term, but, what's going to happen in the future. We are very concerned that as the city continues to debate short-term rentals, that this too might become an Airbnb destination. Despite city regulations, Airbnb locations exist in Portsmouth today. Mr. O'Leary has stated that it is not his intention to rent this property. However, what about the next owner? Our rental property next door will negatively affect the value of our home. The decision to approve this ADU will have a long-term impact for our Hawthorne community. This will be forever. Introducing ADUs of this scale will erode our long-established neighborhoods. Over time, we fear that our neighborhoods will transition from communities to market-driven revenue generators. ADUs will not solve our workforce housing problems nor reduce rents in the Portsmouth market. Please note that we have shared our comments and concerns with the property owner. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to or against this application? Please state your name and address.
Excuse me. I'm Leslie Brenner, and I'm the owner of 34 Hawthorne Street, where I have lived since 1982. My house faces the property at 225 Wybird Street. Their side picket fence and grassy backyard surrounded by big old trees is my view directly across the street. I was the young newcomer all those years ago and immediately embraced those who were mostly older neighbors at the time. Over the years, I've established longtime friendships with newcomers as well. It has been a wonderful community of friendship and camaraderie. Properties turn over, and with new owners, our little slice of Portsmouth has remained comfortably intact. About a year ago, upon meeting the wife of the applicant, as they had just purchased 225 Wybird Street, it was mentioned that they had plans to build a small structure for his elderly mother. Then this past June, Mr. O'Leary informed each of the neighbors he had plans for what he called a small ADU, a space for his mother. Upon receipt of the plans, I saw that the size and scale of that completely detached structure was considerably larger in footprint than described and much taller. It was a two-bedroom house. The zoning board agreed. Since then, the plans have been altered to make the same structured an attached dwelling. When looking at ADU definitions, some concepts I've found describe a second dwelling right on the same grounds or attached to your regular single-family house, such as an apartment over the garage, a tiny house on a foundation in the backyard, a basement apartment. This current proposal, while now looking to be attached, is not exactly a tiny dwelling or an apartment over the existing garage, but instead a full two-bedroom home. It seems to be out of line with traditional ADUs. The unnecessary connector section adds to the excessiveness of this proposal. If you allow this structure as is, you are saying that building a full two-bedroom house on a too small parcel is just fine in our neighborhoods. Knowing that Mr. O'Leary's mother is quite elderly, it seems the future use of this two-bedroom house is to become a rental property, and that concerns me. Might it end up as a short-term rental in our quiet neighborhood? That would be highly disruptive and completely out of character. Will the next owners of 225 Wybird Street likely see it as an income-producing rental unit? There's no way that this new two-bedroom house would be considered affordable, which is what I thought the city desired. I read in a butter Stephen Bergeron's strong opposition letter submitted to the planning board that he included the negative impact of light pollution with this proposed density, and I agree about that impact. Also, access to Hawthorne Street will cause additional stress on parking on our little street filled with bump outs. I do lament the loss of green space happening all over. The green spaces are part of our neighborhood's charm. The resulting property will end up with barely any yard to speak of at all. How is that desirable for them? I do want to stress that I am not opposed to any additional add-on structure, just this one, which is much too large in scope. In fact, when my next-door neighbors tore down a small house and built a standard-size home within all the permissible setbacks, I had no problem with that at all. They are an awesome family, and we've become good friends, and there's plenty of grassy area around their house. I realize that even if this 225 Wybird Street proposal falls within existing requirements, the whole ADU experiment within the city may need to be reworked or at least more clearly defined. With this two-bedroom house being larger in scope than what a small one-bedroom attached ADU might consist of, I strongly urge you to deny this applicant's request as stated in the abutters notice. Your denial will reflect that you are indeed careful stewards of our environment and of our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to speak to or against this application?
Hello, I'm Juliette Grant. I live at 243 Wybird. So I am on the corner of Wybird and Hawthorne. And my view from my house is right on the side. There's actually a drawing of the side from Hawthorne Street that shows the house, the connector in the house. And so right now I just see a house. The land does sort of slope down. I feel like eventually I'll be looking at a wall of a house, just sort of extending back into the backyard. I know the connector is designed to connect the two units for zoning or planning purposes, but my question is, if that adds to the 750 square feet maximum, is that legitimate or not? I'm not really sure how that works out. The other thing I wanted to know is, going back to the water issue, is that something that needs to be taken care of, having that plan and investigation done before you approve the planning, allowing them to construct this? Because I'd love to know how that's going to affect Wybird Street and the neighbors down the way before that's been approved. And then a little bit more about what Leslie was saying is, I'm not really sure what the finished square footage of the original house is. I think it's upward of 3,000. It's a large house. Mark lives there by himself. He is proposing to build the secondary structure of 750 square feet plus whatever the connector is. I just feel like this is a very big property all of a sudden. And I'm not really sure how that goes in the future for potential buyers in the future and what people might be considering for their own livelihood, what they might need. It just seems a lot of space to be in one small yard. And also that it's a house attached to a house versus an apartment or a dwelling above a garage or something like that. It just feels a little bit excessive to me. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak to or against?
Hi, my name's Mike McNeely. I live at 205 Wybird, directly next to 225. It was mentioned several times in the presentation. So I share a lot of the concerns, the same concerns that others have mentioned. I spoke with Mark in person about this today. these things, as you probably know, are very unfortunate. It kind of pits neighbors against neighbors and sort of tears at the fabric of little communities. I don't know how much, I'm not that familiar with the process, so I don't know how much discretion you have in this, but as others have said, it does seem to fit, meet all the requirements in terms of coverage and things like that. But at the same time, if you look at, in parts of town like this, there's very little open space. And so it's really valuable to be able to be at your sink doing dishes and look across a yard and up a ways beyond that. And I'm downhill from this. So for me, all of a sudden, we're going to be looking at, a pretty big structure. And I really appreciate how thoughtful they are being about all the neighbors. And again, it's a difficult situation. But at the end of the day, I do think it will hurt property values for those direct abutters. We've had water issues in our basement. We, maybe a year ago, had to actually file an insurance claim to do some mold abatement and rip out a floor because half our basement is finished. I understand they're taking steps to address that, and I hope that would actually happen because that's a concern of mine, being slightly downhill from there. And it sounds like they have to add to the parking a bit, so then you're increasing the amount of non-permeable ground, so that, of course, contributes to potential drainage issues. And I worry a little bit about precedent, as Jules was just saying, that where does this lead to in other situations like this? Maybe it's not this particular one, but for other people in similar situations, I don't think anybody moved to the houses that we live in thinking, yeah, it'd be great if there was a large structure in the middle of that yard. We bought the house because we liked the openness, the open feel. So it certainly is a dramatic change to the character of our little part of the neighborhood. And the other concern that others have mentioned is what happens with the next owner and the next owner. And for my family personally, we were right there. So the cars, if it eventually there's short-term rentals or even some, kids right out of college living there, or the cars coming and going, it's going to change things a lot. So I completely appreciate what he's trying to do. As I told him, I did want to state my concerns. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Anybody else here to speak to or against this application? Is there anybody on Zoom? Second and last request, anybody speak to, for, or against the application? Going to close the public hearing. I've got some concerns about drainage, as Councilor Moreau brought up. I feel it's a big question.
I'm getting confused between the ADU law we're trying to change right now and the actual existing one.
Yeah, I had
Do
to
we?
go back.
So I'm hoping somebody can straighten me out as to whether or not we require, because I know in the new one, we're requiring meeting all the drainage requirements, right? And I can't remember if that's in the existing or if that's just in the new one that I've been working on.
So there's no standard that addresses drainage, especially for single-family dwellings. We have occasionally requested that as a stipulation that the drainage be reviewed by Public Works. I would recommend, and this is upon my understanding from Public Works, what they want to see is, and I actually wrote it down because I thought it might come up, that a professional engineer certify the stormwater management plan prior to the building permit. This is Public Works, this is what they want to see when they review it, and that would be a stipulation. We do not require drainage for either single-family structures. We don't typically require for a new single-family structure. We don't usually require that. So usually the planning board will add a stipulation if there's concern raised by the abutters or other property owners. So that would be my recommendation, that if it is a concern, that a professional engineer certify the stormwater management plan prior to the building permit.
Just 1 second. I agree with what the planning director just said. I think 10.8.14.63 does require us to find compatibility in design, and I think design could include drainage. So I agree that a professional engineer should, but I also think that the abutters deserve the right to see what those solutions are. So that's my thought, but you had a,
Oh, same idea, Beverly, current and new. Parking requirements currently, or a attached ADU, one per.
One designated spot is required.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Andrew had his hand up.
yes, I'm sorry.
To dovetail off of Greg's point, the way that the parking was designed here with the tandem spot and then the additional ADU spot, it almost seems as though the tandem spot is restrained and totally constricted by the ADU spot. And I would beg to question the circulation of cars and how that would play out.
Well, it's required to be owned by the same person, so that it's an owner management issue.
Okay.
So the definition of a parking spot is a space where a car fits, not.
Yeah, it meets it technically. I'm just thinking it's a circulation nightmare. And that's another point.
Yes.
Some of the abutters and neighboring property owners spoke to size and massing in regard to the sloping lot. 34 Hawthorne has a plus or minus 430 square foot garage. 232 Wybird has a 504 square foot garage and shed, and those are all in flat lots. And I think that they're either just garages or believe one of them is an ADU. So the sloping lot and sloping nature of this, as well as the additional square footage, seems very intense. I think it seems as though there are better ways to fit this within the neighborhood contextual reference or architectural reference. And I think those are primarily my thoughts on how to make it blend better.
Anything else?
Yes.
Yes. Peter.
I'm struggling with the ADU at 750 square feet and the square footage determining the parking if it's a two-bedroom unit. That almost changes the aspect of a 750 square foot one bedroom versus a two bedroom. It almost seems like it should need another space or something. Seems like a challenge there.
So I know there's a standard, and I believe it is one designated space, and it's a little different than I think our parking regulations, but I think if you go, the site plan provides adequate and appropriate open space, landscaping, off-street parking for both the ADU and the primary dwelling. I don't see actually that one designated space now that I'm looking. So let me look, I'll have to check.
That's the challenge with the parking. Does each of those bedrooms have a driver and a car?
Well, we have a section that planning director cited. There's also another one, N81470, which allows us to require additional or reconfigured off-street parking spaces to be consistent with the required findings. So there is under the existing ordinance, and I'm suffering from the same thing Councilor Moreau is, because we've been working on the new one, so I have to come back and refresh my recollection of these standards. We can consider that. I'm less troubled by that, other than it adds to the impervious ground.
Right.
And if we add another space, that'll add more impervious ground. And whatever the solution is, and I looked at this site myself, I can read the topo, it's a pretty significant grade, but I'd like to know where that water is proposed to go, and I think, as I said earlier, I think the butters deserve to see that. So I'm uncomfortable with a conditional approval. I'd rather see it come back, but that's just my thought.
Two choices.
Yes, Jim.
Yeah, I'd like to second what Peter Harris said about to me, it's incongruous to have a parking standard on square footage and to apply the same number of bedrooms, because bedrooms kind of dictate how many, or could often dictate how many cars there'll be. So I think that's an issue that should be addressed in the future. And My other concern is architectural compatibility. We have a description in our packet saying we'll be compatible, but I really like to, I'm a visual person, I'd like to see renderings. So those are two other items. I mean, an additional item, if we're going to continue this, that I'd like to see.
More than the elevations.
Well, yeah, it's black and white elevations. I think they can do colorized renderings of what the building will look like.
So if I could add a little clarification on the parking, 10.112.311. For a dwelling unit, 500 to 750 square feet, we require one space per unit. And I think the chairman's correct that you can take, if you think there is a need for an additional unit, but certainly it meets the requirements of our off-street parking requirements for a residential unit.
Okay, because I've been around for a long time. I remember when we did the first ADU, now we're working on the second rendition, but the first one, we had long discussions around this kind of thing happening where there would be a giant connector room between two, and we've gone back and forth because one of the whole ideas is that these should always look like single-family homes. And so I get there trying to make this look like an addition by only having the one entrance, but when you have just that small little sort of connector room and then two separate things, it does make it look more like two homes versus one home. So I think that's where I'm getting hung up in it being consistent. And I don't really have a solution for this, but there, because we talked about, we didn't want someone to put in like a 10-foot or 20-foot breezeway between, two buildings, making it look like two separate buildings. We didn't want things to look like duplexes when it's really a single-family neighborhood, because that's where the ADUs are supposed to be additional dwelling units that are within and look like a single-family neighborhood. So I think, as much as they've made this very tastefully and it's all well put together, I think it would have almost been better if it had been almost an addition to the house versus a whole separate building with just the connector room. And I probably can't, it meets all the requirements, so I have a hard time saying it can't go through, but that's where my hang up with this one is. I think the drainage is a really big issue, whether or not we require that to be done before we approve this or we approve it conditional. I just would want to make sure we're very clear on how we're approving it. That would be my 2 cents.
I agree.
Councilor Moreau just made a statement that I want that reinforces what I'm about to say, is that unless I'm missing something, it meets all of the requirements. Except drainage. Well, and then what we've heard from drainage is that the requirement of a licensed engineer certifying drainage prior to a building permit is what is typically done on an application for a significant through public works. That's one way to do it. I sympathize with concerns about open space. However, this is not. This is someone's property. This isn't someone's owned view. It is not a city park. It's not public park. I keep hearing this person's lot being referred to as, our open space or my view. And we talked a lot about facts tonight. The facts of the matter are this meets the requirements of our ordinance. I'm so sorry. This meets the requirements of the ordinance. I can't see a reason to not move forward with considering it.
Well, thank you. I agree with just about everything you said, and I'm not moved by the fact that it's proposed in the short term to be for his mother. That's information, but we have to think long-term use of the property. It is private property, but there is discretion in the ordinance. There's enough discretion that I think this board could say it does or it doesn't meet the standard. There's not a metric. We can't say it's a half-acre lot when you require a 1 acre lot area. It's nothing that clear. I'm not troubled by the size of it as much as I think some people are, but the drainage, I'm an engineer. The drainage concerns me. I want to know where that water is proposed to go, and I think it needs to be discussed at a public meeting. But I don't want to dominate this any more than I have to as the chair.
So if I can read between the lines, you would like drainage study presented before we approve it versus putting a drainage study as a simple approval stipulation.
Yes.
Because that would provide a little more checks and balances. We actually get to see the study versus just saying that it gets.
I would see that this be continued to a future meeting with that information, any other information, to address any other concerns to come back, and the abutters would have the right to see it. That's
comfortable with that.
I'm good.
Yes, Andrew.
I wanted to clarify something that Councilor Moreau had said. In the first iteration of the ADU policy, what was the determination of the length of the connector space? Was there a maximum?
I don't remember. I just remember that how we drafted it was trying to minimize that from happening, because that
Sure.
was a concern when we were talking about our intent of what we were looking for. We were looking for the neighborhoods to stay looking like single-family neighborhoods. And so, that was a long time ago, and now my brain is really on the revisions and not the current, so.
Yeah, I can,
That we're
can
working on now.
empathize with your position, certainly. I'm just looking at a 16-foot connector, which is longer than the actual height of the building. And so that,
Right,
you
it's
know,
pretty
gives a
long.
pretty compare and contrast type of scenario. And that's where I start scratching my head a little bit.
I can tell you that I have just recently added to the draft that we're working on a very clear and concise purpose and intent at the front of the ordinance, so that hopefully that kind of idea comes across. I'm hoping that helps that up, but we'll see.
But that won't guide us tonight.
No, it doesn't. I know. I'm just trying to tell you, I'm working on it.
You actually should be careful that does not guide us.
Exactly. We have to be governed by what we have existing, has been adopted by council. Any more discussion? Would somebody like to propose a motion?
Do we need to go through all the findings of fact or no?
Well, not if we continue it.
I'll make a motion. I move to continue this application to the next meeting, conditioned on the submittal of a drainage report that's prepared by a licensed engineer in the state of New Hampshire, and to prepare architectural drawings that demonstrate in color or better renderings than black and white that the ADU is compatible with the existing structure.
Is there a second?
A second.
Second.
Would you like to explain your motion?
Well, I think you did it best, Chair. The drainage is serious out there. I also visited the site, and I think it's important enough that we know ahead of time, and I think we owe it to the abutters that they're confident, too, that this site will not cause more problems with their properties. And with regard to the architectural compatibility, again, I'm very visual, and I'd like to see color renderings of the ADU compared to the existing dwelling.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Point of clarification, if the vote was to pass, it would need to include a date and time certain for the
He
continuance?
said the next meeting.
Did he? Okay.
To the next, all right. I'll amend that to the next meeting.
I heard you.
Said it.
You said that, okay.
Is that enough time?
But thank you for clarifying that. Yes.
Are you looking for my comments?
Did you both have your hands up?
Nope.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I would ask for a roll call.
We also, just so clarification, there's two items in this motion with a second. There's one for the professional engineering drainage study, and the other is for color renderings.
Agreed.
Everybody understand that? Yes.
I'd just like to state that I normally would not want to support putting this off for a drainage study, except for the fact that this is a very unique property in the way it has, I mean, to me, it looked like a good 8 to 10 foot drop off of a street down sort of into a hole of this backyard. I could be wrong. I was ballparking it by eyes, but it seemed like a really, really big drop. And because of that, I think the uniqueness of it might require that be looked at, because you do want to get concerned about putting more impervious surface into that kind of an area. So for that, I would support that motion. That's all.
Any other discussion?
Is there an
We've got a
issue of
request for a
time?
roll call vote. I believe we have to do that at the request, so would you care to, can
Yep.
you do that?
Yes, I can do that. Planning Board Member Hewitt,
Yes.
Planning Board Member Almeida,
Yes.
City Manager Conard,
Yes.
Chairman Shellman,
Yes.
Councilor Moreau,
Yes.
Planning Board Member Harris,
Yes.
Planning Board Member Bahama,
Yes.
Planning Board Member Simonis.
Yes.
I think the motion carried unanimously. So we will see you next month. Next month.
They can postpone it if they have to.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
I don't know if I understand that now.
The next two items we have on the agenda are items Roman 4D and E, which are both a request of Bromley Portsmouth LLC as owner for property at 1465 Woodbury Avenue. One is for a wetlands conditional use permit under section 101017 of the zoning ordinance, the demolition of an existing structure, parking, utility infrastructure to be replaced with lawn and erosion control measures to result in a 4,760 square feet of disturbance in the wetland buffer area. Property is on Assessor Map 216, Lot 3, and within the Gateway Corridor 1 district, and also the request of the same owners for the same property for an amended site plan review. We have a motion to consider these items together and to vote on them separately.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Let us proceed with the wetlands conditional use permit portion, but you can describe both.
Great. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Nick Dewhurst with Bowler Engineering, representing the applicant Bromley Portsmouth LLC for the demolition of the existing former schoolhouse restaurant building and associated parking area. The building is at 1465 Woodbury Avenue. The site we're looking at is right here. It borders Commerce Way. The Home Sense is right here. The Wendy's is kind of planned south. The application is relatively straightforward. The former schoolhouse restaurant building, it's been run down and dilapidated for quite some time. And it's actually become quite a safety hazard for the owner. They've experienced some trespassing and some other activities like that. They've actually blocked off the building and parking area with some construction fencing to kind of mitigate that issue to the best they can. So really, what the project proposes is to demolish the building and the associated surrounding parking area. Again, it's kind of the area that I'm highlighting here, and really that whole area will just be replaced with a lawn. We went before the Conservation Commission last August and received a recommended approval for the wetland conditional use permit with two conditions, the first of which being the grass lawn area comply with NOFA standards for organic land care. The second of which is to ensure that no snow will be stored within that project area. We've actually addressed those comments and revised our plans accordingly and resubmitted those to the board. Other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Yes, I guess I didn't mean to limit you to just the conditional use permit. So, I think you described everything.
Sure.
Did you find anything in the record? I have one question about preservation of that building.
Yeah, so unfortunately, the owner isn't able to be here tonight to speak in a little more detail to that. But as far as I know, the building it's kind of so far gone that the structural integrity from both a code compliance standpoint and a structural integrity standpoint is compromised, and it's kind of beyond that point of restoration.
It's just a question of point of information, that's all.
Got it.
Any other, yes, Greg?
Just for clarity, because it doesn't really say, it's all a common owner, owns the whole plaza.
Correct. Yep.
So basically, you're just getting rid of an eyesore and putting in grass.
Exactly.
And you haven't been able to fight a tenant over the last 20 years that it's been vacant.
Yeah, again, I can't speak to the owner. I don't know too much history behind it, but.
Okay, so it's all the same person, and you guys are just going to get rid of the commercial space and put a lawn in there.
Exactly, yep.
Very simple.
Yes, I've been around long enough to remember when it was a restaurant. It was a schoolhouse restaurant. And it closed about 20 years ago. And frankly, I thought the reason it still stood for 20 years is because of its historic value. You're probably aware it was a schoolhouse in 1830 when that whole area was just farm fields, and I thought the owner wasn't permitted to tear it down. I guess I was wrong, and did this go before the city's demolition committee or anything like that?
So actually, I believe the reason that this process, the amended site plan approval, as well as the wetland conditional use permit kind of came to be is the owner went to pull a demolition permit and was informed that he needed to go through with the site plan amendment process. I don't believe, as far as I know, there's any, I don't think the building is listed on any, is listed as or identified as a historical building. I think the reason for the wetland conditional use permit and site plan amendment was because the proximity and the work within the 100-foot wetland buffer.
Would this need to go through the demolition committee?
This will have to, upon an application for demolition permit, it will be going through the demolition committee, so that's what we have in the memo, that we anticipate that this would go before the demolition committee. And I do not think that it's listed on any, either the National Register, a state listing, or a local designation. I'm not aware of that.
Chairman, can I just address that quickly?
Yes.
In actuality, when it gets posted for demolition, there's a period of time of which someone can then object to the demolition, and if someone objects to it, then it goes to demolition review committee. It does not do it directly. It's only if somebody objects to the demolition of a property outside the HDC. Just so everyone's clear on that. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go there. Unless you'd like to go object, then it would.
I looked at a couple of the earlier plans, and there's no conditions on them. So, any other questions? The applicant? Either part, site plan or, seems pretty straightforward. No other questions? Open the public hearing. Public hearing of both these applications. Anybody wish to speak to, for, or against this application? Nobody in the room? Anybody on Zoom? I'm going to close the public hearing. Oh, wow. Board's discussion.
There's a pretty good expose on it in the Athenaeum catalog. That's about it.
Anything revelatory in there?
Not quite. Pertinent to this board.
It's a neat structure, but if he follows the guidelines for demo.
Can we make conditions that they document,
That's actually part of demolition review committee does that.
That's not our
Can
business.
request it.
I don't think we have any authority other than our site plan and a wetlands conditional use permit.
Exactly.
I think the point of the delay, that if it is sent to the demolition committee, would be to either get documentary evidence, or if somebody's interested in preserving it, they would step forward. But I think that's the point of part of that review.
Yep.
And as an 1830 brick structure that has structural problems, it might be difficult to move.
And it looks like it's falling down. I find the land is reasonably suited for the use and activity, since they're getting rid of structure and giving us grass, so.
Are you proposing to go through the draft findings?
I'm trying
Yes,
to
sir.
move us along.
Does everybody have the draft findings of fact for the wetlands conditional use permit? I'm learning as we go along, and I'm thinking if we're not going to change anything, are we good with these?
I am absolutely good with all of the findings of fact. I don't know about anyone else. That's my
Everybody,
person.
Yes, to all of
everybody
them,
read them?
huh?
Everybody read the drafts?
No objections.
So, no additions?
Nope.
And would somebody other than Councilor Moreau like to make a motion pursuant to the proposal that we've been given in writing in front of you, everybody?
I'd like to move that we find the conditional use permit application meets the criteria set forth in 10.1017.5 and to adopt the supplemental, finding of fact as presented.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Conditional use permit is granted. Site plan, same, we have a set of findings there, including that monster I mentioned earlier.
Oh, no, we still need the second vote to approve. We just found the findings of fact for the record.
Yeah. Now we gotta,
Well, we can do,
No, I think
we can do both findings, and then we can do both votes. I mean,
Well, there's separate-
whatever your preference, I don't care.
The vote is inclusive of the language in the memo.
Yeah.
Right?
So there's separate findings for both a wetland CUP and for a,
He just moved the first bullet, I think. I think you just did the first bullet, right?
Correct.
so I read it, yes.
Right.
So if you wish to,
Grant
we
the
can,
permit.
if you want to go in order types, you can grant or deny at this point, and then we can go to the next one. I don't, either way. Doesn't make a
I'll make a motion that we vote to find the application meets the criteria set forth in 10.1017.50 and to grant the wetland conditional use permit as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? You said more than you had to, but that's fine. It works. It works.
I don't say much here, so.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now the findings are adopted and the wetlands conditional use permit is approved. Site plan.
I personally, my opinion is it meets all of the conditions as presented in the findings of fact that go on for several pages.
I agree.
Quick question for the planning director. Did you include those? Did you exclude those?
is it all findings?
Thank you for your patience.
No.
Is it
You.
for site plan?
New
This is a whole
process.
new world
New
for us.
process.
I get it. Thank you for giving us so much simple ones to try to figure this all out. It's really nice.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Is this just a New Hampshire, is that a New Hampshire law?
Brand new,
Straight across the state.
brand new.
You not from around here?
We're Massachusetts. so.
August 23rd is our first meeting.
We may have a small technical issue with documents going back and forth, so I'm just going to read 5 additional criteria that I believe this application satisfies. They're numbers 15 through 19 in the site plan review regulations 2.9. Bear with me. Provision of usable and functional open spaces of adequate proportions, including needed recreational facilities that can reasonably be provided on the site. Probably not applicable. Next, adequate layout and coordination of on-site accessways and sidewalks in relation to off-site existing and planned streets, accessways, bicycle paths, and sidewalks. Next, demonstration that the land indicated on plans submitted with the application shall be of such character that it can be used for building purposes without danger to health. Next, adequate quantities, type, and arrangement of landscaping and open space for the provision of visual, noise, and air pollution buffers. And the last catch-all, compliance with applicable city-approved design standards. In my opinion, we're good with all those. Just technically, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this is an amended site plan, which if there was a problem somewhere else on the site, this could bring those in, but we're not aware of any problems on the site, right?
We aren't, and I think that some of the findings that, or the draft supporting information
could apply to those. There's no new development proposed, only demolition and restoration to open space and lawn. So I would suggest that the supporting information provided for the other criteria, this is a very unusual case, could apply to the criteria that you've just read as applicable facts to support your finding.
So for clarification, you did that because this is the corner of a very large parcel and part of a very large site plan, not just this drawing, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And our zoning code allows for that. I could have either sent it to the technical advisory committee, or I could bring it here, and so we brought it here.
Got it. Let's see. I'd like to move that we find the site plan application meets the criteria set forth in section 2.9 of the site plan review regulations, and adopt the supplemental information as findings of fact as presented.
Second. I believe we have to do as amended, because we had added a few.
As
amended and read into
Oh,
the
because we
record.
added the conditions.
As amended and read into the record, thank you.
Okay, as amended, yep.
Second that. Any discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Findings are adopted. Next. We have to act on the,
I make a motion to approve the site plan application as presented.
second. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You are approved.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Poke, poke, poke.
You said 8:50.
The hang of it.
8:50.
Yeah, we still have a
No,
presentation.
yeah, we have one more presentation.
Yeah, I did 9:20.
Yes, so Ben should
On
be
Zoom.
on, and
Oh.
you could go and introduce the item.
We now have a presentation on the parking supply and demand analysis study, where the city will be seeking proposals from qualified consulting firms to study the supply and demand for parking in downtown Portsmouth. The study will assess and identify current and alternative approaches to ensure adequate parking supply, inform future public investments, and guide policy choices and zoning updates, including strategies that optimize utilization of parking facilities in the pricing structure, cultivate mode shift, and mitigate induced parking demand where possible, and make effective use of available and future technology. Our Director of Parking, Benjamin Fletcher, will now join us by Zoom to discuss this. If the technology works.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yay,
Yes.
Ben.
You're flashing back and forth.
He has to talk to show
I
up.
think Steph's pulling up the presentation.
There we go.
My glasses.
Do we have a good connection?
Good.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for the opportunity to speak tonight. Real quickly, next tile, please. Just this one's easy. It's a common industry best practice for municipalities to update mid and long-term strategies with regard to parking and transportation through engagement with a professional consulting firm. The city last did such a study in August of 2011, resulting in the 2012 parking principles document that the current city currently adheres to for parking. So next tile, please. As in 2012, the proposed 2022 study will focus on assessment and identification of current and alternative approaches to ensuring adequate parking supply for incoming demand, inform future investments, and guide policy choices and zoning choices that optimize utilization of public parking facilities and pricing for those facilities. Cultivate mode shifts, mitigate parking demand, and make effective use of available and future technologies. Next tile, please. How this would inform regulatory updates going forward, we would include a benchmark study to review regulations of comparable communities to identify best practices that have been successful in those arenas. Explore anticipated parking demand that would result from approved but not yet built development projects in Portsmouth. Explore parking utilization data to target pricing strategies that impact utilization patterns in an effective way, and identify strategies the city should be considering to mitigate demand and cultivate mode shifts where available. Next tile, please. So this is the study map area that is proposed at the time. I don't see any reason to really move off of the map that was in 2012, which is what this is. Obviously, that's open for discussion. So final tally, please. Certainly. The first thing I would say that with a study this type is that any planning related decision making should be withheld until we hear back from the vendor that has chosen to do this study, so that we can make intelligent decisions going forward based upon current data. We're currently working with 10-year-old data. Although the 2012 principles are a very good outline, I'm excited to see what this new study might bring going forward. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Fletcher? Yes, Jim.
Mr. Fletcher, when was the last parking study done? Do you know?
2012.
2012, okay, sorry. And was there one relatively close to that, like within 10 years? I'm just trying to see, because it seems like we do a lot of parking studies. I'm just trying to get them figured out chronologically.
So I can't speak to before 2012. I got here in 2017. 2012 is what we've been working off of since I arrived. It's commonplace to do these every 5 to 10 years. I think 10 years is a good idea if you have a good plan, which we currently have. So I think we're right on target here.
Okay. And will the boundaries be the same as the 2012 study?
That's the idea.
Okay.
Yes, you're hiding behind.
My big head.
Mr. Fletcher, is there a way that we could possibly, I don't know if we need to expand the amount of inquiry into the map, but maybe expand a slightly different inquiry to expanded neighborhoods that surround the downtown?
So, the last study, and most of these studies are done based upon the CBD. My jurisdiction is the entire city, but mostly our attention is paid towards, revenue generating areas where we can deploy pricing and other policies to mitigate demand and to change behaviors to what is more desired. In other words, longer stays in the garages and more people walking as opposed to driving around. I don't see any reason why we couldn't change the map or expand the map, given everybody's concurrence that it was valuable.
I just think the impact that downtown parking has on the surrounding neighborhoods would be a key element to us understanding. That's all.
Certainly, and understood. Understood. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd concur and ask if you go 5 blocks out, maybe 6 blocks outside of the downtown area, you'll find that there's a lot of workers from the downtown area that come and they park in these neighborhoods, and then they walk into town and take resident parking from those neighborhoods, and you're essentially diverting that away from parking in town to neighborhood space that it's impacting the residents' ability to get parking.
So I'm happy to speak to that. We do have the Downtown Employee Program, which currently has just under 500 users. We see, relatively about 6,000 in sales a month on $3 tickets that allow a person to park for a 10-hour shift. So we do have a program in place for the downtown employees. I think we have seen in the Islington Creek area that there was not a large mitigation from the NPP situation that we put in place there that sent people to surrounding areas. I think that we had housed a lot of those parkers already in the Foundry Garage under that program. So I'm sure that still exists, respectfully. I do think that a large contingency of those folks are addressed through that program.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that program?
Certainly. So it's designed for the barista types, the folks that work linens and such. It allows for a 10-hour stay in the Foundry Garage for a cost of $3, which is about 70% off the going rate of $1 an hour. It makes a $10-hour stay a $3 price. And folks come down to the garage. They show a recent pay stub that shows that they're a downtown employee of a downtown business. They're eligible for 22 of these stickers per month, and some folks buy 5 or 6 depending on their shift load. Some folks buy the whole allotment. Folks that are looking to buy more or want a greater degree of ingress and egress access through the facility are encouraged to purchase the monthly parking product at $100 for residents and $125 a month for employees, which allows for 24/7 access 7 days a week and a guaranteed space in the event of a snow or other events. So it's a different product entirely, but it's the 320 product is geared towards the downtown employee.
And when was this put in place?
We put this in place, I believe, in early 2019. So I've got consistent increasing figures on this product from that point forward. We see it spike in the springtime when the summer hiring season takes place. We're currently going strong. Last month, I think we did $6,700 in sales. If you divide that by $3, it gives you a number of passes that were sold, day passes that were sold. So the way it works is the patron comes in, they pull a ticket as a normal person would, a non-monthly person would, and on the way out, they place a sticker that they've purchased in advance over the top of their exit ticket. They place that ticket into the dispenser, and if they're under the 10-hour time limit, then the gate bends and they're on their way. If they stay long or if they stay overnight, some folks do, and it just resumes the regular hourly charge after the 10 hours is expired.
And how is there some type of advertisement, or how is this notified to the public?
We advertise it at the time. Now it's mostly word of mouth. We get a lot of folks come in they've been told by their constituents that this is available to them. Certainly we could put out some press releases to try and reiterate that it's out there, but we have pretty strong usership right now.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That type of
Sure.
notification. And I'd never heard of it either. So
It's an excellent program with great usership. Actually, we're very proud of it.
The study area map was up there pretty quickly. Did you exclude the municipal lot and the parking down by Prescott Park?
Can you please put the map back up?
Yep, it's coming.
Sure. So this is the map, just one tile back. This is the map from 2012. I didn't see any reason to alter it, but certainly it's open for discussion. You just need to go back one tile.
Stephanie's trying to make it happen.
It's on its way, Ben.
No problem.
Technical
No problem.
difficulties.
As soon as I can see it, I've got a copy of it here too. What was your particular question?
I couldn't tell. Did you exclude the municipal lot down on Junkins?
It looks like that's not in there because that's not a commercial lot. And there's some areas in here that aren't commercial as well. Again, this map was drawn in 2012. It seemed to me to be a perfectly viable map at least for discussion going forward. We can certainly alter it.
No, it's a great map for discussion. I walk around town a lot, and that lot is used quite a bit. It just seems like data that should be.
Mr. Chair, obviously High Hanover's part in the study area. I can't tell for sure. Is the Foundry Place garage?
It will be in there. I actually don't. I think it might be cut out in this map, but no. It's hard to see.
Didn't exist
if
at
it's
the
cut
time,
out
so
in
it's
this
not
map,
on the
certainly the Foundry will be part of the description. Absolutely.
So, yeah, so that Foundry will be part of it.
Absolutely, certainly, yeah.
What's the timeline? When do you propose to put the RFP out?
So we believe we have a document that we like, pending approval through Beverly's office and legal, we think we would put out within this month. I would think that we would have a number of suitable vendors willing to accommodate our request by the end of the year. From that point, I think it would be more of a fluid timeline based on what the vendor believes that they need to make an accurate assessment of what they're seeing in Portsmouth. Certainly, I have several years worth of quality data. There is a COVID year and a half, 2 years in there that basically skews the data a little bit. So, but we do have a good almost full year now out of that. I think it would be fluid from that point. I think it would be up to the vendor to decide what they would think that they would need to see in real-time data to form an accurate assessment we could rely upon.
Thank you. Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you all.
And I'm not going to add anything tonight, unless anybody else has something. Yes.
No, just very brief comment on that. So that's obviously centered around parking. I think something that should directly follow or correlate would be transportation and transportation analysis. I would think. I don't know in what capacity, but my thinking is the West End has obviously developed significantly since 2012, putting more cars, pedestrians, cyclists, as well as residents in that area. So although it may not be a direct downtown parking or overlay district type of analysis, it could have some sort of impact or residual impact because there are more cars, people, and items on the road. And so a transportation analysis thereafter or conceptual thought may be something that we can incorporate.
I know there's another RFP out following up on Councilman Moreau's suggestion to make State Street two-way that includes an analysis of that builds on a model that was done 3 years ago,
19,
something like that, which did include most of the downtown for an actual traffic model. I'm not sure if they're updating, if that would include all that you're saying, but it would include at least part of it.
Yeah, and I think the West End is certainly an area of emphasis.
Ben, did you want to say something to that?
No, I'm just.
Okay. I saw you flash on the screen.
Just here if you guys need me. You still have me as a panelist. I thought there might be a reason, so I'm hanging out.
Okay. Anything else? Yes.
Is this like free mic time? Question?
Yes, you have 3 minutes.
Have that and maybe D
I
Street.
just have a couple for the planning director.
I think that's next.
Beverly, is there any updates on the West End Yards parking demand study?
No, Jim, I'm sorry. I keep meaning to ask them to send me that. I'll try and follow up with that. I think
Okay,
it
great.
wasn't really a study. I went back and reviewed that stipulation. We just asked, because after you mentioned that, it was really just that they share their data, that was the basis for their request, and that's what we asked. That was already created, and so I just think they just were supposed to share it. I don't think we've seen it, so I will follow up. Sorry.
I think I made a conditional approval for the 100-space expansion, and I think I was pretty clear that I was interested in the square foot of the unit, the number of bedrooms, number of occupants, and the number of cars.
The stipulation didn't carry all that. I can send it to you if you'd like to take a look at it.
I think I corrected it in the minutes. I had to do it the next meeting, but those are the 4 items that I was interested in from West End Yards.
Was that a condition, or did they say they had that data?
I remember, well, we had the meeting, I think, in February. Then on the minutes in March, I corrected what
Okay. Well, the minutes are what they are, so we'll see what they show.
Yeah, I mean, I could take a look at the minutes. I think it's really, I mean, for my part, I would probably stick to the stipulation, what was read into the record at the time, but I could ask them for that, and if they have that, I don't mind asking for that as well, Jim.
Well, again, I know parking is front and center, and it's a great situation to have right there, 250 units, different size apartments, and we all trying to guess about parking demand, but if we have a real actual building in Portsmouth, under current rental conditions, we'd have a very good idea whether 1 car per unit's appropriate, 2 cars per unit. This is why I think it's,
Understood. I can certainly ask for that.
okay. And my only other request is that the presentation that Ben Fletcher did be put in the minutes tonight, or in the package.
We can have that posted.
Yeah.
Anything else? I'll call the meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was pretty.